that's not a very good road if you've ever been through there. It's it's just about 1.5 feet wider than my truck. It's definitely not for two trucks or two vehicles to go through at the same time. And I was easing along in 4-wheel drive, and we came over a little hump, and about from here to that door back there, in less than 2 seconds, a wolf came out of the woods, went across the road, and was gone. It was almost like it didn't happen. But when I looked, saw the size of that wolf, his top of his back was all, I got a full-size Chevy 4-wheel drive pickup. And I'll guarantee you the top of his back was not much below the line of that hood. And when he hit that road, when he came across, when his nose went into the woods on the left side of the road, his tail had just basically come out. If you ever watch them, they pretty much move their tail pretty straight. His tail had just come out of the woods over here. Now this is a full-size pickup, so that was a big wolf, I can tell you that. I took a picture of a wolf track in Missoula, inside the city limits of Missoula, Montana, back in 1st of May, because turkey season was still in. And that track it rained all through the night, and I took my dogs up to a closed Forest Service road, and then we walked up. And it's the Blue Mountain Recreation Area that's right there in Missoula. And I walked in there maybe about a 1/4 mile, and there was fresh wolf tracks. And I mean, it's not gooey mud, it was solid. I could hardly leave a track in it. But there was a clear wolf track there that I took a photograph of. I laid a brand new $1 bill, 6 1/4 inches, right next to that track, and that track from the tip of the back, front toe, the longest toe, to the back of the heel is just as long, if not just a bit longer, than that brand new $1 bill. That's not a small animal that leaves that kind of track. And how many people in this room have actually seen a wolf? See, you could ask that question 5 years ago, and there'd probably only be a couple of hands went up in this area right here. I travel a lot. I'm one of these guys, my wife hollers at me all the time because I spend more time looking off the road than where I'm going. And I spot things. I just got this ability, all my life I've been looking for game. And in the last year, because saw a lot of these off the interstate, because we've had to make 7 trips to Salt Lake City in the last year for surgery on her arm. And down along I-15 south of Dillon, there's one stretch there that in 4 trips we saw 5 wolves. And altogether though, in the last year, I personally have seen 16 wolves. Now when one person can see 16 wolves in Montana, we know we got a hell of a lot more than the at least 566 number of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks keeps throwing at us. That is one of the big lies. One of the problems we have is, these people, we've turned this around on them. They thought they were in total control, but we've reached the point where we've had enough, and we're coming back at them now. And they are backpedaling worse than a goose with a 10 gauge stuck right in his face. And they are now. Idaho is a good example. Up until they finally decided they were going to have this season this year, Idaho Fish and Game claimed they had 820 wolves. And I'm talking about just a couple of months ago. Well, within a month, that number went up to over 900. And then a few weeks later, it went up to over 1,000. Now they're admitting they got at least 1,200 wolves. I mean, that wolf population grew like crazy in the last 3 months, and we haven't even shot any of them, the number of wolves we have out there is so much greater than what they're telling us. And I still ride Fish, Wildlife, and Parks really hard because they are a big part of the problem we have with wolves. They have lied to us about the number of wolves. They have lied to us about the damage wolves have done to our big game populations. Right now, how many of you have heard the report that between Missoula and Butte, there's a record number of elk now? That number came out about, it was about 3 weeks ago, something like that. And I travel, that's one stretch of highway I travel a whole lot. And, I have seen a few more elk in the river bottoms, just like everybody else in western Montana, because they ain't going back up there. And so, where's this record number of elk? Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation just put out their official herd counts for different states. Now, when they got to Montana, they kind of did a little bit of a disclaimer. According to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, our elk herd is stable at 150,000 elk. And of course, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, they've gotten a little more on the ball on this thing in the last year and a half or so. And they're putting disclaimers in now. They said that these numbers are the Wildlife Agency's numbers, not their numbers. So they're telling everybody where those numbers are coming from, and which is about time. Idaho, at least Idaho, was a little more honest in their numbers. Yeah.
Do you think that they're up in the ante on how many is in their count because of the monies that are going to be made from fishing game?
Well, that's part of it. Yes, they don't want you guys buying fewer licenses. I mean, that's their bread and butter. It's like buying a used car. That guy's going to tell you all kinds of great things about that car, and you'll probably find out a whole lot different when you start driving it.
Well, they're not operating the hunting season over for wolves in Idaho yet, though, are they?
What's that?
The tag system that they're doing here for wolves?
No. Idaho is very liberal. Here in Montana, they're sticking with their 220 quota, and I'm going to get into some numbers here in a minute because they keep saying we have 566 wolves. Of course, they like to throw that disclaimer "at least" or claim at least 566 wolves. If you go back and find a copy of the deposition made by Dr. L. David Meach in 2008, he was the expert witness for the delisting hearing, and it's really a good read. Now he's a wolf biologist out of northern Minnesota, and he's worked with wolves for they've had wolves there all through all this. I mean, they've had wolves. They've never not had wolves. Let's put it that way. Wolves have not been eradicated there like they had here, and so he's probably the closest thing we really have had to a true wolf expert, in the United States. And he believes in wolf control, wolf management, and he believes that wolf numbers have to be controlled, or you'll create the problems that we're now experiencing. But in his deposition, he pointed out that there's no way that in Idaho and Montana and northwest Wyoming, because at that time they were only claiming, I think, 1,400 or maybe 1,500 wolves in all three states. He said there's no way that they could have that few wolves. He said the normal reproduction rate for wolves will run between 25 and 35%, and has been known to go even higher at times. So he said by his math, and this is 2008, according to his math, there should be somewhere around 4,000 to 4,500 wolves in the Northern Rockies, not 1,400 or 1,500. Well, if you use his math and go into what would have been Montana's share of the wolves that they were claiming back then, even using their numbers that they claimed in 2008, Montana right now is home to about 1,600 to 1,700 wolves, not 566. And if you take and do the math, you take, just say 1,600 wolves, and they do fill their 220 quota. That means there's 1,380 wolves still left in the state of Montana. Okay, between then and this time next year, there's a 25% increase. That means all of a sudden you're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,750 to 1,850 wolves in the state of Montana. So, it's time for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to realize and remember who the heck they work for, and for them to get honest and get real, because we're not buying any of their malarkey anymore. And they know it. That's probably why there's no Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks people in this room right now. So they know. I think they're afraid that we might get ugly.
It's not all of this when you say they.
Yeah.
Is it correct to say that most of the orders for the state Fish, Wildlife, and Parks are not those orders coming from the federal government?
Well, they're giving them, let's put it this way, they're giving them a very strong lead, and they're probably reminding them how many federal dollars they get every year. I mean, I guarantee you, it's the old strong arm, just like the mafia, so quite honestly. But actually, our Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, there's another person that they get their orders from, and that's our governor. The governor is the puppet master of our game department. So whenever they take a stand, it's not necessarily Joe Marier's stand. It's probably Brian Schweitzer's stand. And so, I mean, it all flows downhill from the governor's office. But, and again, we have accepted, once you accept money from the federal government, it's kind of like trying to get your virginity back. And once you're there, it's gone. Our game department has become an integral part of the problem. And fortunately, there are a couple of candidates running for governor now. And I've talked to a couple of them. And I'll probably put something out on this in another week or so, but a couple of them I have talked to have claimed that if they're elected, one of their first duties will be to give Fish, Wildlife, and Parks an overhaul. And it's much, much needed. I'm not a native Montanan. I'll be the first one to admit it. I moved here because I loved it here. I didn't have family ties to keep me here. And matter of fact, I love Montana more than my family ties back in Missouri and Illinois. So I moved out here. And that's why I started Lobo Watch. I used to come to Montana all the time. When I worked for Night Rifles and I was doing articles for Peterson's Hunting, and I mean, this was one of my favorite places in the world to come. And so, I grew up in the Midwest, and I decided one day about four and a half years ago that I'd seen all the cornfields I need to see for the rest of my life. And I told everybody I was going to go someplace where I could look in one direction or another every morning and see a mountain. And so that's why I moved to Montana. And so, I started Lobo Watch because I did not move here to watch all of it die. It was too good of memories. I mean, you people have longer memories and greater memories than I do. Most of you are born and raised right here. But I feel like I'm just as much a Montana resident as anybody in the room. One thing about me is, and a few people have made this comment, is they want to know where the heck I was 16, 17 years ago, because I don't mind getting in people's faces, and that's what it takes. We have to let them know that the buck stops here, or in this case, the wolf stops here, and we have to go in there and just keep after them. Has anybody got any ideas how much money, how much the wolf is costing the state of Montana pretty much every year right now with the numbers we have? I mean, it keeps growing as the numbers grow. Any of you familiar with Montana Senator Joe Bailey?
Yeah.
Joe's a good guy. Joe's a really good guy. He's right there. He's on our side. Matter of fact, he's a leader. And he and I, a couple of years ago, when I first started Lobo Watch, he was one of the first people to get a hold of me. And I had been doing some research on the damages, the costs, how much it costs to do this. And this is like 3 years ago. So he said, I'll tell you what, he said, you take and you decipher all that with what you come up with, and I'll do it with what I come up with, and we'll see if we're pretty close. I came up with, 3 years ago, I came up with like 61.5 million a year, and Joe came up with 62.5 million. So we were pretty darn close. We're probably close. He made the comments, probably closer than he was ever with anybody else in the Senate at that time. Well, since then, we have recognized new problems with wolves, like studies that show the loss of weight on cattle, the stress factor, and Ron Skinner is a veterinarian out of Hall, and I've talked to Ron. He's a rancher too, and he averaged 47 pounds lighter in his feeder calves 2 years ago. and, you know, each one of them.